This is Ag Matters PM from the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network, brought to you by the Iowa Soybean Association, your daily recap of the information that affects Iowa's farmers, producers, and consumers, right here in the heart of the heartland. With reports from our award-winning broadcast team of Dustin Hoffman and Riley Smith. Now, from the IARN studios in Des Moines, here's Dustin Hoffman.
Welcome into Ag Matters PM from the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network. I'm Dustin Hoffman. Today is Friday, May the 20th, 2022. Coming up on today's show, Riley Smith will talk about the Drought Monitor with Iowa State Climatologist Glisan. I talk with 1st District Congresswoman Ashley Hinson. We also have a check of your ag weather outlook. But first, let's run down those markets. It's time now for the Ag Matters PM Closing Market Summary, your source for market analysis and settlement prices from the day's trade in Chicago, courtesy of the folks at agmarket.net. Well, we're at the end of the trading day for Friday, and let's see how things went by talking with Robin Schmahl of Ag Dairy, which is partnered with agmarket.net. Robin, thanks for taking the time to visit with us today.
Hey, appreciate it. Always enjoy being on with you, Dustin.
All right, so what happened to wrap up the week on corn and soybeans?
Well, we had a little pressure on the corn came through, and then but the soybeans and soybean meal were stronger. Now, corn is kind of interesting. I think corn mainly was under pressure. Well, we have some places had some good planting progress, some good weather. Others are still struggling as far as the wet weather is concerned. But I think more of the issue that we've seen the most of this week was the pressure from wheat. I mean, we had quite a bit of a push higher on wheat on Monday. And then since then, we've kind of followed through on Tuesday, but trailed off from them. And corn just really didn't want to be higher. And so as wheat weakens, corn starts pulling down. And that was probably the main thing that we're looking at there. We're seeing some changes from some longer day maturity corn to shorter day maturity corn already. They wanted to get that taken care of before we got too far along, and everybody wanted to do that. So little pressure on the corn. I think corn just got too high too quickly. Going over into the soybean market, you know, we see probably a bigger thing that maybe didn't get a hold real quickly or real good footing in the market is there is some freeze warnings for some areas of North Dakota, South Dakota, and Minnesota this weekend. Now, just in some pockets, not widespread, but if there is any soybeans that have popped out of the ground, if they were able to get them planted, that certainly is not a good thing to be looking forward to. Now, China is going to auction some more of their reserves of soybeans totaling 500,000 metric ton on May 27th, next week, Friday. Some of the stuff they have in reserves, but they've had increased some of their bookings already with South America as well. Now, then on the wheat side further, the Wheat Quality Council tour showed an estimate in Kansas down quite a bit from last year at 39.7 bushels to the acre compared to last year at 58.1. In Colorado, they've got down quite a bit too, and an average in the state of 31 bushels. Now, you'd think that'd be supportive to the market, but I think the market got a little carried away, you know, based off the news last weekend with India. I think it got a little bit carried away, and now it's trying to find an equilibrium.
All right. And of course, you know, when things are good in wheat, sometimes it takes everything along for the ride, as we talked on Monday. And, you know, one way or the other is taking things along for the ride. Now, as we look ahead over towards livestock, I mean, how did things finish there? I know we got the cattle on feed report coming out a little bit later this afternoon. What are we expecting to see, and what do we think that's going to mean for the markets and stuff like that?
Well, what we're expecting to see is on-feed numbers average of a 101.4%, placements at 96.1%, and marketings at 98%. Now, we might see the first start of placements starting to decline after we've seen some growth in that market. We've seen this week the feeder cattle market, feeder heifer market. We've seen lower cash prices in that. We've actually saw lower cash price in the cash market as well in cattle. We saw $2 lower in the southern live cattle. We saw $3 lower in northern dressed cattle. So that did not help the market at any. And we saw pressure on cattle futures mostly. Now, feeder cattle, I mean, they just can't get it going. They're looking new contract lows. numerous days. Today, another new contract low, even with lower corn prices. They just can't get it going. It's a little bit of surprising there right now, because generally it works opposite in the direction, but they just can't get any support under that market. Now, I thought that we would see a little bit more stability in the cattle market today because of the cattle on feed report, but I think there's some concern there by the traders that maybe there'll be a surprise again, like the last cattle on feed report showed placements so much higher than anybody anticipated. Looking over at the hogs, they shined today again. They really got fire lit under them after the beginning of trading. They struggled a little bit. We had a good solid week for hogs, both in the cash and cutouts. Now at midday, cash was up $2.02 and the cutouts were up $5.18. So that really shows some solid numbers there. Hams were the leader today. So hogs really seem to have made that V bottom, which we talked about potentially earlier, and they blew past chart resistance today and are reaching higher. So I think it gives the impression that demand may be picking up. Cutouts are seeing some support.
All right. Well, definitely some good news on the hog front, after a couple of weeks of it not being the greatest. Now, if folks out there want to talk market strategies, look at what the situation is, how do they get in touch with all of you at agmarket.net?
Well, you can call me directly at 877-256-3253, or best is to go to the website, agmarket.net. We have our phone number on there and the ability to contact any one of us there.
All right. Well, Robin, thank you so much for the insight, and we'll talk to you again real soon.
All right. Thank you. I always appreciate it.
And that again was Robin Schmahl with agmarket.net. Let's take a look at the closing numbers brought to you by the folks at Bar Chart.
July corn is down 4.5 at 7.78 3/4. December corn down 4 even at 7.32 even. July soybeans up 14 3/4 at 17.05 1/4. November soybeans up 7 1/4 at 15.21 3/4. Soybean meal up 3.60 at 4.24.20. Soybean oil up 80 cents at 77.99. Chicago wheat down 31 3/4 at 11.68 3/4. Minneapolis spring wheat down 51.5 at 12.79 even. Kansas City hard red wheat down 42.5 at 12.52 3/4. And July oats down 15 even at 6.12 3/4. On the Merc, live cattle up 7 cents at 131.57. Feeder cattle down 72 cents at 153.40. Lean hogs up 3.57 at 108.87. Pork cutout up 2.92 at 114.35, and Class 3 milk down 32 cents at 24.48.
And that's been your Ag Market Recap. We're going to take a quick break here on Ag Matters PM and hear from our sponsor, the Iowa Soybean Association and the Soy Checkoff. And when we come back, Riley Smith talks with State Climatologist Justin Glisan. This is Ag Matters PM.
Iowa Soybean Association is driven to deliver for Iowa's 40,000 soybean farmers. We're proud to provide objective agronomic research, a helping hand with soil and water stewardship, and timely industry news powered by the Soybean Checkoff. Learn more at iasoybeans.com.
Welcome back to AM/PM from the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network. I'm Dustin Huffman. Well, the new U.S. Drought Monitor came out earlier this week, and Riley Smith sat down with Iowa State Climatologist Dr. Justin Glisan, and here's what he had to say.
Well, it's another week for the U.S. Drought Monitor report to come out, and today we're talking with Dr. Justin Glisan, the Iowa State Climatologist. Justin, what came out on the report today?
Hey, Riley, good morning. So not a lot of change today. In fact, it basically status quo across the map. So no changes, no improvement, no degradation. And that's pretty good this time of year, given the delayed planting that we've had, given cool and wet conditions that we saw for much of April and early May. We had a heat wave last week, temperatures up in the 80s and 90s, higher relative humidities. We had a few chances and a few periods of wet weather last week, including a derecho that clipped the northwest corner of the state. So basically the weather has been cooperating, a great planting window, and again, no real improvement or degradation in the drought map.
Right, and of course, you mentioned that northwest corner of the state, still seeing some elevated drought conditions. What's planting conditions looking like there, and just harvest or crop progress in general?
Yeah, so we made significant progress. We're still behind last year, and we're still behind the 5-year average. If you look at the USDA NASS report that was issued on Monday. You mentioned Western Iowa, still D1 and D2 drought there. We've seen precipitation deficits persist in Western Iowa going back basically 16 months. We've made a chip in those deficits, but we're still seeing those dry conditions persist. Great planting conditions. I think we'd rather plant into drier soils than really wet soils. Also, given the warmth that we're going to see in June and July, push those corn roots a little deeper in case we do get into a persistent dry signal. But overall, planting conditions were excellent last week. A little hot, but we'd rather have too hot and get those soil temperatures above that 50-degree threshold. If we look at those 4-inch soil temperatures, a little cooler in northeastern Iowa, basically upper 50s, but across the rest of the state, mid to upper 60s. So overall, great conditions. We'll see some rain over the overnight hours tonight, possibly some severe thunderstorms. But this week has been a continuation of that pretty good planting window.
Right, and when we talked last, we were talking about how a lot of farmers were thinking that April was like a really wet month. And then, it came out, it was just a little wetter than average. How are we looking this month so far for rainfall amounts?
Yeah, so April, May, June, the 3 wettest months for the state. June is the wettest for the northern 2/3 of the state, May for the southern 1/3 of the state. We're running a little drier than normal for May right as of now. You look at pockets across the state where we're slightly above average. Overall, as I mentioned, slightly below average. But last year, you look at in May, we were probably about 1 inch to 2 inches below average, and 3+ inches in some parts after the month ended and getting into June. And we really saw drought expand this time last year. So we're in a better position. We're better suited than where we were last year. Especially given we've had a replenishment of subsoil moisture in topsoil. Now we're still short basically across the state, but we're right in the middle of that distribution of where we would like to be. So moving forward, we would like to see climatologically expected rainfalls through the end of May into June. And if we look at those short-term outlooks, we are seeing a signal for cooler temperatures through the end of May. And those in the presence of a drier signal, we're not seeing that drier signal, but overall, if we do see cooler temperatures in May, June, July, those do help mitigate moisture stress on crop. Those do help mitigate expansion of drought as those cooler temperatures cut down on the atmospheric demand for moisture. So the cooler signal, if we are coupled with a near normal to slightly elevated signal, is a good signal to see this time of year.
Right, and something else we talked about a few weeks ago, last time we talked, was La Nina and whether or not it'll stick around later this year. Now, we have heard reports that it could stick around, say, in October, and if it does, that really increases the chances for it to stick around over winter. So what are we seeing there?
Yeah, this has been a very anomalous year, anomalous stretch of years in terms of La Nina. We were talking about a double dip La Nina last growing season and then the growing season before that. So this is the 3rd year that we've seen La Nina hang around. In analog years, going back to 1950, in which we've seen 3 years of a stacked La Nina, we only have a handful of those years. So the data is somewhat sparse, but as you mentioned, a persistent La Nina through summertime will, in those analog years, hold on into fall. So in that handful of years in which we've seen La Nina, in the modeling, we do see a slightly dry signal evolve in June, July, August timeframe, a meteorological summer. But there are a lot of factors that have to come into play for that La Nina to hang around. The ocean has to stay coupled to the atmosphere, meaning the thunderstorm activity is shifted further west in the Pacific Basin and hence impacts the jet stream across the United States. So the soil moisture that we're getting now and the larger scale atmospheric pattern that we've seen, the persistent heat wave that we saw last week, those components impact the larger scale weather signal. So we'll have to see moving into June and July what the atmosphere is responding to in terms of the recent precipitation and other factors that are happening across the United States and west of us in the Pacific Basin.
For the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network, I'm Riley Smith.
Thanks, Riley. Now let's take a look at the Ag Weather Outlook. Well, the clouds were crossing the sky here today, and it was just no real sign of the sun for most of the day. Of course, the sun was starting to break through across the state, but it seems like it's going to be short-lived. Let's take a look at what the National Weather Service has in store for the next 24 hours.
As you can see, the cloud cover and the showers pushed off here through the course of the day. The sun started to peek through, and we saw highs in the mid-60s to the low 70s across the state. Now, tonight will be variably cloudy. It will start out with partly cloudy skies in some areas, but rain chances are going to move in. And we'll see lows from the low 40s to the low 50s. Now, tomorrow, chances of rain increase across the state. Cloudy skies as well, and lows from the low 50s to the low 60s. Taking a look at the affiliate weather map, tomorrow Cherokee will have a slight chance of rain, cloudy skies in 53. Shenandoah, a slight chance of rain and cloudy skies 55. Des Moines and Waterloo both have about a 50% chance of rain and highs of 55. Albia has showers likely at a high 56. Clinton also has showers likely, hot spot on our map at 61.
For more up-to-date local forecasts, tune to your local Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network affiliates. That's been your check of your Ag Weather Outlook. When we come back, I sit down with Iowa 1st District Congresswoman Ashley Hinson to talk about how some policies are moving around. This is Ag Matters PM.
As we approach planting season, make sure you stay safe and share the road with your local farmers. Slow-moving tractors with large planters occupy a lot of space on the road, so stay patient and follow at a distance of around 50 feet. You should never, ever try to pass them at a bridge, intersection, hill, or curve. It's far better than putting yourself or someone else at risk. So please, stay safe and remember to tip your hat to your local farmer this planting season. This message was brought to you by your friends at the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network.
This is AM/PM from the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network. I'm Dustin Huffman. Well, the House Ag Committee met earlier this week and a few bills were advanced out. A lot of them have the support of the Iowa delegation if they haven't been sponsored by them personally. I talked with 1st District Congresswoman Ashley Hinson about where things are with some of the policies that are moving through. And today we're joined with Congresswoman Ashley Hinson. Thank you so much for taking the time to visit with us today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
All right, so obviously agriculture issues have been top of mind in both chambers of Congress. You're working on some initiatives there as well in the House. Tell us about some of the things you've got going on, including the Precise Act. Tell us a little bit about that.
Right. Well, I'm very excited about the Precise Act. It actually made it through our Agriculture Committee here in Congress this week. So unanimous support to get out of committee there. And really what that's about is expanding access to precision agriculture technology. We know that it's very expensive to get into the technology. Some of the equipment is very pricey. And so our goal was to try to encourage more people to invest in this technology. We know that reducing inputs and increasing outputs is obviously the goal of every farmer. And so I think this accomplishes that. It's going to be key to increasing those crop yields, lowering those overall inputs, and also environmental impacts too. We know farmers are the best environmentalists, right? And so what this does is it opens up existing programs through EQIP and CSP to really to open up that access to funding so that people can access these technologies and utilize them in their operations.
All right. And so what kind of support and stuff are you seeing for that? You know, as I know, obviously you said it went through with the committee yesterday, but tell us a little bit about what kind of support you're thinking you're going to get for this.
Yeah. Well, I think right now people are very cognizant about our food supply in this country and making sure that we protect that. And so that is one area where I think we're going to try to see some bipartisan support on this bill. Obviously, it already had that. I know Cindy Axne signed on this week as well, our fellow congresswoman from the 3rd District. So we've got a lot of support for these types of programs and this type of approach. And I'm hopeful that we'll be able to get it across the finish line on the floor.
All right. And another thing we're going to talk about is obviously supply chain issues and the work being done to help alleviate those issues. I mean, we hear from moving grain to getting parts when you need them in the field. I mean, it's just been a kind of a whole big mess across the economy, but agriculture is really taking a hit as well.
Right, absolutely. And when you look at supply chain and enhancing that supply chain for here at home, it really is national security. Food supply security is national security. So one of the things that we wanted to do to make sure that we're resilient going forward is to protect that, prevent future shortages of essential items and in the supply chain. The breakdown in supply chain has obviously caused a lot of chaos in this country, raised costs on our working families and everybody for inputs for farmers. The shortages there as well. So this is a bipartisan bill. It's called the Strengthening the Agriculture Food Supply Chain Act. And what it would do, it also passed out of Agriculture Committee this week, but this would really focus on a long-term strategy for resilience in the food supply chain. It would create a task force at USDA that would look at the stability and the reliability of our agriculture and food systems and require them to report back to Congress with recommendations. So very excited about this. This is about having a long-term plan for resiliency. And again, this is another area where we have a lot of bipartisan support.
Now having them report back to USDA, that's good, but there are farmers out here saying, okay, we have them reporting, but what is it going to do long term for fixing the problem? I mean, you have farmers who can't find a part for their tractor within 6-state radius and are either having to trade for another piece of equipment, or they're looking at some serious downtime or having to go to smaller pieces of equipment just to get through. They're going to wonder what good is reporting going to do to USDA to fix the issue?
Well, this is not for them to report. This is for them to report to us with recommendations on how to improve the security, the safety, and the resilience of the supply chain. So this is about actually coming up with recommendations that will fix a lot of these problems that our farmers are facing long term. And that's what this is about. It's about making sure we have plans so that we are resilient and so these challenges don't happen again in the future with our supply chain.
All right. And of course, now earlier this week, Governor Reynolds signed our Biofuels Access Bill. We know biofuels is something that you've been focused on quite a bit in Congress as well. Tell us where things are with your initiatives there.
Yes. Well, as we know, a gallon of gas is over $4 a gallon. I filled up my minivan in Cedar Rapids last week. I have an E85 flex fuel minivan. It was $2.87 a gallon for E85. So I just can't tell people enough here in DC about the benefits of ethanol as a clean burning fuel and something that helps to support our local economy in Iowa as well. So I'm continuing to call for an all of the above energy strategy. E15 is just one part of that strategy. We wanted to make sure that this administration did an RVP waiver across the country. We now have bipartisan support from some state leaders as well in the region standing up to the administration, because it's very clear that their policies have caused the increase in fuel supply, fuel challenges that we're facing. That's a whole issue with the supply chain too, right? The cost of fuel and what that impact is on the supply chain. So we continue to advocate for biofuels and ethanol as an answer that we can turn to immediately. And I'm hopeful that the administration will start to listen. And we shouldn't be dipping into our strategic reserve either. I mean, that's a huge challenge. When you look at the amount that we've taken out of our strategic reserve without opening up access to energy production here at home, energy security is national security. And that's where our biofuels can play a significant role in making sure that American families aren't paying through the nose for what they put in their cars.
And we had the president out here last month, obviously announcing that waiver for the 2022 E15 sales, but that's only a step in the right direction. And some of the governors in the Midwest, both sides of the aisle, have finally said, well, if EPA is not going to take care of it and the government's not going to take, or the White House won't take care of it, we're going to take care of it. And so what kind of, I'm sure you've probably talked with Governor Reynolds a little bit about that initiative, and what kind of things are you telling your congressional colleagues about what's going on back here at home?
Well, this is an issue that you're seeing, as you mentioned, a lot of bipartisan support. We have a bipartisan biofuels caucus here, a lot of great members on both sides of the aisle stepping up to the plate to continue advocating for this. So again, this is something we've been shouting to the rafters for the past several months as those fuel prices have continued to rise. I am very pleased that the governors of, I think it's 8 regional states in the Midwest have stepped up to unite on this issue, because again, this is about driving down these costs for working families. Inflation is a tax on working families, and fuel costs going up as a direct result of this administration's anti-domestic energy policies. It's really hitting home for so many people. Whether you're driving to work or just running errands to run your kids around town like I do, it's challenging for so many families, and it's time that this administration listens and we go to that all of the above energy strategy.
All right. Well, Congresswoman, I know you probably have been back home and seen the farmers who are working really hard to try to get things in the ground when Mother Nature lets them. You have any messages for those farmers in your district that they can take from you here coming up to end the day today?
Yeah, well, I applaud you for all the hard work that you do to feed and fuel the world. If there's anything our office can do, please don't hesitate to give us a call.
That again was Iowa 1st District Congresswoman Ashley Hinson here on Ag Matters PM. And just like that, we're at the end of the show for today. You can find all our content online at iowaagnet.com. Also, don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, TikTok, and also find our video content and past episodes of AM PM on our YouTube channel. Don't forget about our twice daily free market podcasts. You can find them on Google, Spotify, Podbean, Amazon, and Apple. From the IARN studios in Des Moines, I'm Dustin Huffman. For Riley Smith and Avery Haskell, this is Ag Matters PM. Thanks for watching.